have leads.
And then personally for you, how do you view your role as a director here? Because you are a fresher set of eyes here on something that people have been looking at for over 30 years. So do you view yourself as a conduit for investigators, for the family members to tell their stories? Do you view yourself as someone who could be perhaps sharing a new perspective? What does that really look like for you?
I mean, I was really interested in two things. I mean, one, obviously, the case, like my best friend said when I started this, is really fascinating. And if you go in just with that, it's an amazing story. But it the story really changed for me when I met the families and realized like I couldn't mess this up. Like I had to, I had to do a really good job, and I really felt their pain. And as someone who doesn't normally work in true crime, I mean, I think one of my first thoughts was, how do people do this over and over? It's so difficult emotionally to sit with people who are living with such unresolved pain. And I remember my first interviews were with the Ayers family, and it was just, and we did really long interviews because we didn't know if, the parents especially would be able to do another interview because it's so hard to relive that. And so I would do these super long interviews that, as a filmmaker, I wouldn't normally do interviews that long. I would usually do sort of shorter ones and be, oh, we'll revisit that if I need to. But this was the kind of thing where I didn't know if I would get a second chance. So we did these like, for me, like super long interviews where you're just sitting with these people. And it was really, as someone who believes that you have to be kind of porous to do a good interview, you have to really sit with people wherever they are. You know, I could really, yeah, I just think it's really hard to be a true crime filmmaker for those reasons because of, what you're sort of sitting with all the time.
And you're just sitting with the grief, the unresolved grief. It's been over 30 years, and it feels like by watching this, this is still something that is not only so present with these families, but something that feels like that they can tap into this pain, and it feels like it just happened yesterday for them. And it felt like, because you talked to the victims of all, the family members of all of the victims, and it seemed like they were in different points of their grief journey, perhaps. Can you talk to us about that, A? And B, how did you get them to trust you to be the person to tell their story?
Well, I think I'll answer the second part first, and then you might have to remind me because I haven't had a lot of coffee yet. But but I think that I joined the project after some of the team was already engaged, like the executive producers, and A24 and HBO had already been on the project for a while. So um, Mickey and Beth, who were two of the executive producers, and Dave McCary, who's Emma Stone's husband, like they were all pretty involved with some of the Ayers family at least. And so they had already had those relationships. So I walked into that with some help. With Sonora and Barbara, that was more of a process because I think they just were less inclined to do interviews. And even like the heir's parents, these parents, like you sit with them and you're just like, I do not want to interview them again. With Barbara, I almost felt protective of her because I knew that whenever she does an interview, she just can't function for a really long time. I suspect it's the same with Pam Ayers. And so, it's like hard to do your job in a way because you don't want to, these mothers, and these siblings, you don't want to bring them more pain than they've already been through.
But the conversations were so important, talking to them at these various stages of their grief journey. And Sonora Thomas, the sister of Eliza Thomas, she said something really poignant. I want to share that. She shared this. There's a real benefit for both teller and audience member to telling that story and to hearing that story. I think that can change how the memory lives inside of you. And she talked about trying to keep her sister's memory alive. So as the director of this series, essentially, what does that sentiment mean to you? And did you feel the weight of that as you were making the series?
Yes, I mean, also, it's so funny you should say that because actually, when she said that, it really sort of mirrored something that Sean Ayres, another of Amy's siblings, said as well, where there was this image that was sort of a family home video of Amy walking away from the camera in this red parka when she was doing Future Farmers of America stuff with her friends. And she's sort of looking back at the camera. And he was talking about how he's trying to hold on to the memory of her, but it keeps fading no matter what he does. And I felt like Sonora and Sean were sort of united in this like attempt to grasp this memory that's sort of slipping out of their grasp, and they're fighting for ways to hold on to it. And I felt like memory was such an interesting thing that held the whole series together almost when you're looking at people's memories and how that relates to confessions and how that can be twisted somehow. But then also there's this beauty to memory of, just wanting to hold on to something that's somehow elusive. And yeah, I was really moved by both Sean and Sonora and the way they talked about that. And I really thought it was very important to include these what they said because I think it's really crucial to how we should think about this kind of crime and what it impacts on the families and siblings.